All right. All right, another short adjournment there at the Madlanga Commission. 10 minutes, the time now, 2 minutes past 4 o'clock. Essentially, the Madlanga Commission hearing, of course, from evidence leader there, Advocate Mahlape Selo, leading evidence for Vusimuzi Cat Matlala, responding to his statements earlier on contained in his supplementary affidavit with his application. His legal counsel today is Advocate Fatima Misi. He is, of course, invoking his rights, as he says, of privilege against self-incrimination and other legal issues as it relates to, in the main, the multi-million rand Medicare 24 SABC contract and his relationship with high-ranking police officials and, of course, other implicated persons. He's refused, in the main, to answer questions related to his relationship with, for one, former Police Minister Bheki Cele and Suspended General Sibiya, including, of course, earlier on we've heard Sulim Karim, which he says form part of investigations, including IDAC-related questions. And now Advocate Silo, together with the commissioners, pressing Matlala, that the burden was on him to demonstrate his assertion of self-incrimination. In other words, if he raises the right against self-incrimination, he is then legally required to explain why he is asserting that particular right. Now, Advocate Selo put it to Matlala in the past while, that he did not want to divulge more on the nature of his relationship with Sibiya because, in fact, he will be incriminating himself in more offences. And Matlala's response to that was, well, I can't argue with you on that. That's how you see it. Now, Thembekile is also monitoring those developments for us. And let's see if we can bring him in. SABC News anchor Thembekile Mkhototo. Well, Thembekile, I mean, it has been quite an extraordinary day at the commission today from, of course, Matlala's legal counsel in the main, who we've been seeing for the past couple of days not being present because she was ill. Advocate Misi now representing Matlala. Just take us through, of course, some of those key pertinent points that we saw today.
Well, Nati, good afternoon. We'll reflect on the legal gymnastics of this morning from Cat Matlala's legal team, but I think more pertinent at the moment is just how we've seen him slowly at times begin to lose, shall we say, his patience. You'll recall his temper when he appeared before the ad hoc committee when he lost it with Derelyn James, the Member of Parliament, based on some of the questioning there. And today, he has not taken too kindly to the evidence leader, Advocate Mahlape Selo, really pressing on questions around Cat Matlala's relationship with Shadrack Sibiya, the now suspended Deputy National Commissioner of Police. We know he's basically, in terms of that relationship, said it wasn't a friendship, and he says they only met or interacted a handful of times. But even to get him to talk about what those interactions were about was a bit of a long process, longer than what you would expect, right? Because he's chosen once again to invoke this right of protection against self-incrimination. Let's bring in SABC News senior reporter Kenny Mapanga, who's with me here. And Kenny, we're back to the issue of Vusimuzi Cat Matlala and the right to avoid self-incrimination, but this time that's really being tested because the evidence leader is not buying it, especially on questions around the relationship with Shadrack Sibiya.
Yes. Well, good afternoon to you, Thembekile, and to the viewers at home. It's now becoming more apparent that this privilege against self-incrimination in some regard is being used as a shield to get away from certain evidence and what it implies. Because the privilege that he seeks to invoke also has its limitations, and you can see that in some areas he's struggling to explain how that has any kind of implication for him in his criminal processes. So if you look at Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya, he's not a co-accused in the Medicare 24 fraud matter, nor is he a co-accused in the attempted murder case of Teboho Tebojane, but that is a subject that he refuses to entertain even in the supplementary affidavit. And it's becoming clearer why he refuses to entertain this particular subject, because the very nature of the dynamic between Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya, including the third party that is Sergeant Fanny Nkosi, who is alleged to be a middleman, will point to alleged unlawful unlawful conduct or alleged sinister conduct. And it'll point to the reason why the pair needed that alleged middleman to begin with to do all of their communications on their behalf. It'll also prove that alleged beneficial transactional relationship with Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya. And if it does that, then you must explain why. What were those alleged favors that you were getting and why you were enjoying that kind of proximity and support from a high-ranking general? That is the information that he's getting away from, that has little to no impact on the current cases that he's facing before courts. Another example is Mike van Wyk. Mike van Wyk may be a witness in the Medicare 24 fraud matter, but we know that the discovery made by the Madlanga Commission goes far beyond Medicare 24. What do those WhatsApp exchanges that show the pair discussing bricks of cocaine have to do with the Medicare 24 fraud case? The reason you're starting to see the reason that he really doesn't want to entertain these outstanding issues is because by their very nature, all of these alleged interactions fall in the realm of alleged unlawful conduct. So we can see here that the privilege is being arbitrarily applied because of the consequences that would flow from him being candid about those interactions outside of the criminal cases that he's facing in different matters.
I'm quite curious, Kenny, just on this application or the invoking of the right not to self-incriminate by Matlala, is that there are other people, other relationships that were detailed in a list we're here to respond. For example, his dealings with people in Ekurhuleni, the Metro Police Department, Julius Mkhwanazi, etc. And in those responses, he says in his supplementary affidavit that ultimately he doesn't want to go into those relationships because there are ongoing investigations or criminal matters. But on Shadrack Sibiya, until it was pointed out, he in fact had skipped that name that was listed and said absolutely nothing.
Well, Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya, along with Major General Richard Shabi, those kinds of names are the names that he completely was silent on in his initial statement. And the supplementary was sought to explain that silence and deal with the issues. But he's still quite vague on the subject matter and the kind of alleged relationships that he enjoyed with different individuals. And the surface, or rather the foundation of those vague offerings, is premised on the fact that quite clearly these relationships are not only pointing to alleged sinister unlawful conduct, but if he were to be frank about it, the consequences would be too great to bear, not only before a criminal process, but before the Madlanga Commission. So, for example, if you are honest about the payments to Suleiman Karim, then you open up the doors to the Commission to ask questions about not only Suleiman Karim, but also Morgan Maumela. If you are honest about Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya, you open up the Commission to the world of the possibility of that alleged beneficial relationship or an existence with the high-ranking generals. Everything that he answers to links to a different issue that could help the Commission get to the bottom of this alleged infiltration in the criminal justice system, how much this alleged cartel exists, how deep its networks are, and how it operates. If he's honest about all of these different events, or rather if he engages with it, Advocate Silla will be able to get to those connections and those links. And that is what seemingly this privilege seems to be about at this particular stage. Clearly it has little to do with the criminal matters, but seemingly now is about shielding you from the consequences of that particular evidence.
Cat Matlala is back in the witness box. We're about to resume.